The ketone is a type of fat that your body can burn for energy that gives you an energy source that's different than burning glucose. And so what your body does to make ketones is it takes the fatty acids that's stored in your system, it breaks it down to use for energy, it goes to your liver and it's turned into a ketone, which then can supply your brain with energy. That's one of the best things about it. Your brain loves ketones. And this whole process developed because, millions of years ago, if you were, alive at that time, basically you went through periods of starvation. It was common that maybe you ate for a month and then you didn't eat for 2 weeks. You ate for another month, you didn't eat for 3 weeks. In the wintertime, you basically starved. So your brain had to have an alternative by which to eat. And that alternative was being able to take your body fat, melt it down, turn it into ketones, and supply your brain with energy. Because the most important thing to keep you alive really was saving your brain function. So that's where the whole process in your body, why you have this metabolic pathway by which to burn fat and turn it into ketones. This is why it exists. Today, we can do something very unique. We can actually take certain types of fat that turn into ketones really easily. They're called MCT, and we'll be covering that later. It's a type of fatty acid, medium chain triglyceride, which your liver will process immediately and raise your ketones really high. And so a ketogenic diet is a diet that means that your primary source of energy has now become ketones instead of glucose. And so that's where the word ketogenic diet comes from. And it's also often just referred to as adapted diet, meaning that your body has adapted itself to burning fat instead of glucose. And it's a very simple process to be able to do this. And I myself have gone through this. And, I went through a year or so of people calling into my site, talking about this diet, didn't really know how to advise them with different things along with the diet. So I just did it one day, and I've been doing it. And it's not that hard to do once you make the commitment to doing it. It's like any diet. It's a little strange at first, but once you get into it, I actually feel great on it. So I have no problems with it. But it's based on a low-carb, moderate-protein, high-fat diet. And it trains your metabolism to run off ketones and not glucose. And so the whole idea of the diet really is to keep your carbs really low, and the carbs that you do consume are low-glycemic vegetables, and you can eat quite a few of those. And then the protein you want to keep to maybe 15% of your diet, because if you eat too much protein, it'll just turn into sugar through the process of gluconeogenesis, which is the process of turning amino acids and transforming those into glucose in your liver. So you don't want to eat too much protein, and you eat a lot of great fat. I mean, a lot of avocados, nuts, coconut oil, MCT oil, nut butters, all kinds of things that you want to eat. Butter, butter's a great thing on this diet. And so that's basically what the ketogenic diet is, and generally it's not hard to get into. I was on the Dr. Hyman diet before I went ketogenic. So Dr. Hyman, if you're not familiar with his book, his new book is called Eat Fat, Get Thin. Great book, because it's all about changing your metabolism over to burning fat for an energy source, lowering your blood sugar. In fact, all his books are really centered around the idea that you regulate your blood sugar, and that's the key to avoiding all chronic disease. So it's a great idea anyway, but the ketogenic diet is one step farther down the road from the diet that Dr. Hyman talks about, and the purpose of that is to really lower your blood sugar and put you in a state of ketosis, because that shuts off cancer. And that's really what the call is going to kind of be about tonight. When you go into ketosis on a daily basis, you shut off the main way that cancer cells metabolize glucose for energy, and so you starve cancer to death. And that's why I wanted to do this call, to be able to explain it to you and what actually happens when you go into ketosis and how you actually do it.
Okay, Roger. So how do we start? Where do we begin with this?
Well, I'll tell you the easiest thing to do and the easiest way to go into it. First off, if you're someone who has diabetes and your blood sugar is way out of control, you have some health issues, you better contact some practitioner, somebody that's familiar with this diet, and get some advice. If not, if you're someone who's basically healthy, just wants to try it out, it's not that difficult to do. Even if you're just getting into numbers that are around diabetic, it's not that difficult to do. What you want to do is eat a really clean diet for 2 or 3 days. In other words, eliminate grains, eat a lot of vegetables, eat good protein, start introducing some good fats. And then what you want to do, this is the easiest way to kick it off, you want to go 24 hours without eating food. In other words, you want to wake up one morning, don't eat anything, just drink water all day. The next morning, by the time you're ready to eat, after 1 day of water fasting, right, you'll be going right into ketosis. So your first meal has to be comprised mostly of fat. In fact, you want to have fat and a little bit of protein. But the easiest way to kick this off is to just have some MCT oil, and instead of anything else, because MCT oil, being just pure fat that turns into ketones real easily, that doesn't break your fast. So your body still thinks it's fasting even though you've just had 200 or 300 calories of fat. And that fat will wake up your brain, and that fat will give you some energy, and then you can wait another couple hours to actually eat. But MCT oil is a type of triglyceride out of coconut oil. It's different than coconut oil. Coconut oil is only 25 to 30% MCT, but you can buy something just labeled as MCT oil. It's completely tasteless, and you can just take it, straight out of the bottle in tablespoons. You can mix it in with coffee. You can mix it in your Tianchi if you take Tianchi. You can do all these different things to actually get that fat in your system without breaking your fast. Now, this is important because once you go through that fasting phase, you want to make sure you raise your ketones, because your sugar is already going to be lower than normal because you haven't eaten. Your body has just gone through a day of burning up excessive blood sugar because it didn't have any choice, right? So the next day, your sugar is a little lower, and to drive it a little lower, to make sure it stays down there, you have some MCT oil, which easily converts to ketones and raises your level of ketones in the blood, and then that helps regulate your blood sugar too. Now, maybe your first meal should come around 9 or 10 in the morning, and that meal might be an avocado with some eggs. And you're thinking, well, that's a lot of fat. Well, yeah, it is, but it's the perfect ketone meal, and it's actually delicious. So you start off with a few eggs, some avocados, and you don't eat any toast with it, nothing like that. And you have that for your breakfast. And what you're going to find out on this diet is because of the fat content and how your metabolism is changing, you're going to find that you don't get that hungry on it. And when you get hungry, it's not that driving crazy, I'm so hungry, gotta have something that happens when you're eating carbs all the time. No, it's just the feeling that, hey, I'm hungry, I gotta eat soon, right? So on the way I do this, I eat a breakfast. I eat breakfast between 10 and noon. And then I eat some nuts during the afternoon, and then I have a dinner around between 5 and 6 o'clock. That's basically what I do. And for dinner, I have another piece of protein, maybe some fish, or protein shake. I have a bunch of vegetables, a lot of steamed vegetables, some salad maybe, and then I have maybe some more, fat. Somehow I have fat in that meal. A lot of olive oil. I'm a massive consumer of olive oil. Olive oil fits into the diet, and I love olive oil. So this is the diet that I'm on. And at that level, I stabilize my ketones. My blood sugar is always stabilized. In fact, today, just so you know, and this won't make sense to you until I explain it a little longer, or later in the call, but today, a few hours ago, I tested my blood sugar. My blood sugar was 72, which a lot of you will go, oh my, that's just wild, 72, right? And if you want to know what that means in other standards, like if you're from Canada or maybe Europe, they use a different measurement. You can divide 72 by 18 and you'll get the number for your country. But my blood sugar was 72 and my ketones were right around 4.5, which is really high ketones. That means I'm completely in ketosis. I am burning fat as my primary fuel, and basically that's it. And that's a really good everyday number for someone who wants to stay in ketosis all day long. Now, again, the advantage of this, and we'll get into it here a little bit, but it's that you're not feeding cancer cells at all. So this, again, in my opinion, is the perfect diet for someone who has cancer or has had cancer and doesn't want it to come back, because it shuts off the food supply. And let me explain that so you understand that a little bit. This theory of ketogenic diet came about in the 30s with a man named Otto Warburg, who won a Nobel Prize in medicine. He was German, won a Nobel Prize in medicine because he discovered that cancer cells had an altered metabolism. That's what he discovered. He got ridiculed a few years later, and nobody paid attention to it much because they said sugar doesn't cause cancer. But basically, he never said that. What he said was that he observed that a cancer cell had a different metabolism. It no longer made ATP or energy using oxygen as a primary fuel. It switched to fermented glucose. Now today, through new modern science that started in the 70s, they now know that there's a protein, DNA, that expresses itself in the mitochondria of a cancer cell. For those of you who are not familiar with mitochondria, the mitochondria is basically the energy-generating part of your cell. In a liver cell, every liver cell, you might have 5,000 mitochondria. In a brain cell, you might have 5,000 mitochondria in a brain cell. Lots of these tiny little energy-producing mitochondria. And that mitochondria generally uses oxygen to produce ATP, and that's generally where you generate all your energy, is in the mitochondria. And this is why they call cancer today, a lot of people are starting to call it a metabolic disease, because somehow cancer has damaged the mitochondria of the cell, and the cell can no longer produce energy the way a normal cell does, and so it turns on a protein called hexokinase 2, which basically switches the metabolism of that mitochondria from using oxygen to just using fermented glucose. And besides switching it on, it's like it opens the door and blocks it so it can't shut. So the flood just goes into that mitochondria of glucose, and it just eats continuously, and it feeds all its rapid metabolism and division and growth because it has an unending supply of glucose. Well, you can all kind of get an idea now why, if you can shut that off, that would have such a profound effect on cancer. Because you're basically, no one has really come up with an idea how to shut that off or change it. And as we all know, they haven't come up with too many chemos or radiation that actually kill cancer without killing people. And so the reality is that for the guy at home, it's the easiest thing that you can do for yourself to actually have an effect on your cancer. And you have to believe me, this is not a big sacrifice to go on a diet like this. I mean, I'm eating so much healthy food, and I get great energy out of it, and it's just eating natural food and proteins and a lot of avocados and fats, and really it's not a big deal in my opinion, especially when you weigh it against the fact that you have cancer. And there's not that much out there that people can help you with that. And this gives you some sort of a control yourself. You can go, wow, I'm working on it myself. I'm doing all I can to actually make this work. The other great thing about this is that there's a lot of research showing that if you decide to get chemotherapy or radiation, being on the ketogenic diet, and I mean really being on it, strictly to where your blood sugar drops way down, in the range around 70, and your ketones are up to 3 or 4 at the same time, if you can be in that state for a week, then you will enhance the chemotherapy and the radiation in the way that it destroys cancer cells. And this is really fascinating because, I know not everybody's going to go all natural trying to treat their cancer, and I'm not talking about this on this call anyway. What I'm trying to give you is a diet that'll help you no matter what you do. And it's been proven that when you go on the ketogenic diet and you get into ketosis and you do radiation or chemotherapy, what happens in the cell is that the cancer cell loses its ability to actually fight off the chemotherapy and the radiation. This is one of the things your cancer cell does. It has an active form of glutathione in the cancer cell that it uses to protect itself from the free radical effect of radiation and chemotherapy. Well, when you go on a ketogenic diet, it switches that glutathione, which is the master antioxidant in your whole body. It switches it from being turned on, a form of active glutathione, to a form of shut-off glutathione that can no longer protect your cell. And so that's one of the great advantages of it, too. You don't have to be on a completely natural diet. You have to just, you can use this diet to enhance anything you're doing with your doctor. And so that's one of the great advantages of it. And so, again, Joan, we should get into now really explaining what to do along with this diet and how to stay into it, a little bit more of the theory. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. And I'm also stuck on something you said quite a while ago that I wonder if people would like some clarity on. And I'm still hung up on how one can have a cup of coffee with MCT oil in it and it does not, quote unquote, break your fast. When obviously, like you said, it's about 500 calories and it will give you energy and you'll feel better and you'll feel sustained. How does that not count? Can you explain that too?
I'll go into that a little bit more. What was exactly?
Oh, well,
your phone broke up a little bit.
Oh, gee, sorry. I said I'm still hung up on thinking that people might want some clarity on how one can have a cup of coffee with MCT oil in it in the morning based on the sample diet you were talking about and have it not actually count as breaking your fast. That it's though you get yeah, if you could explain that too, that might be helpful. And yes, I agree.
Because the body doesn't recognize a pure fat like that because it really doesn't have to digest it. MCT oil doesn't require digestion as normal. It just goes to the liver and the liver completely converts it into a ketone. So there's not any really involvement in digestion and burning that in a normal metabolism for energy. This is why you can do the fats and you can have a drink like this because there's no calories in coffee. I mean, literally a 12-ounce cup of coffee is 5 calories. It's not anything that's really considered breaking a fast. And so that's basically the premise of it. You want to start your day out with the ketones, one, because it doesn't break your fast so much, and two, because now you have a source of fuel without consuming other foods. Okay?
And
is that good?
Yeah, and to clarify, you're not talking about a cup of coffee with half and half in it or cream or milk, just the MCT oil.
Just the MCT oil. There's some famous recipes out there. You can actually just take coffee, if this is what you want to do. You can do this with tea too. Doesn't matter. You can do it with green tea, black tea. It doesn't matter what it is. You can dump your MCT oil in it. You want to either whirl it in a blender to mix the oil up, or you can shake it in a glass jar really fast, and it'll foam up, and then pour it in your cup and drink it. And that will supply you with a morning shot of ketones, and then that'll get your body kicked in and started on this whole cycle of going ketosis. So generally, your first day, by the second or third day, even if you're not doing it exactly right, you'll be in ketosis. If you really want to do it, get on the internet and do some research on it, you'll pretty much be into it right away. It doesn't take that much effort to do it. Now, some people on the phone might be wondering, well, isn't ketoacidosis a medical condition that can kill you? Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, because ketoacidosis is a medical condition that can happen to people that are really obese or diabetic, that have their blood sugars running amok, and that's different than the ketogenic diet. Ketoacidosis means you've got blood sugar that's around 250, or in the Canadian measurement, around 16.5, which is the type of blood sugar that could kill you, right? And then you have all these ketones in your system that don't get used up for energy because your body just can't get the fat that's in your diet out of your system because of the presence of too much sugar. So now you have somebody with elevated ketones and elevated sugar, and that's what ketoacidosis is. It's a completely different medical condition. Ketogenic diet has nothing to do with that. You're basically going to have blood sugar below 80 and then ketones at a certain measurement that keeps everything in balance. So unless you're extremely diabetic and cannot control your sugar, you have very little chance of actually going into that. So that's kind of what the diet is about. It's about shutting off blood supply. And let me give you a little story to make an example here. Because, I'm in the health field. I have a lot of friends who do different diets. I was introduced to this diet by a doctor in town here in Vegas who consults with a lot of pro athletes, and he has them on a ketogenic diet, and he does it himself. But we also have a friend who has brain cancer, and he's an amazing guy because he was supposed to be dead 3 years ago. He had a very rare form of what they call it glioblastoma or something. I think that's what it's called, glioblastoma. But it's a brain tumor that they could only cut out 65% of it. That's common with brain tumors. You can only get a certain amount. Well, they left 35% of the tumor in his brain. He was getting chemo and radiation and all these different things, and then he discovered the ketogenic diet and went on it, right? The next time he got checked out at his doctor, his tumor was completely gone. Now, it hasn't come back in 3 years. In fact, when he goes into the doctor, which he does every 3 months for a checkup because of the dangerous type of cancer he has, they're just amazed at quite a few things. One, that he's alive, and the other thing is that there's no trace of it. He doesn't have any trace of it in his system at all. And all his health numbers are so amazing, and it's because the diet literally shut off the blood supply to his tumor. Now, this is one of the cancers that responds almost, you could say, the best to this diet is brain cancer. It's also one of the cancers that's the most hard to treat, especially in children. So, this has a lot of medical applications to it. It's a very important diet and concept to get familiar with because, everybody on this call and in this country actually knows somebody that's going to get cancer. Everybody knows it could be happening right in your immediate family, and it's just a tool that'll help you out to figure out how to feed someone and how to actually give them a chance to fight no matter what therapy they're doing, because this doesn't interfere with anything. You're just eating natural food. This is one of the great things about it. You're just eating natural food. This is one of the reasons why the diet has never really caught on in the medical community, for cancer anyway. It's because, one, the cancer industry and medicine in general is not interested in natural things that work for disease. You can't sell a natural thing for a disease. They're not interested. Two, there's not that much information out there of anybody trying to train doctors on it. And 3, you can't make a dime off of it. You put somebody on a ketogenic diet, they basically head off to the grocery store and buy some food, go home and eat, right? You might have to go to the health food store and get on the internet and order a bottle of ketones, but there you have it, you know. So it's pretty much not one of those money-making journeys that you're going to take when you're doing cancer. So I want to get into it now a little bit about some of the things you have to do along with this diet. You don't want to just think that that's all I have to do is this one little thing. There are some little things you have to pay attention to, right? One of them is water. You know, Joan, you work with a company that's all about water, so you kind of know what water is all about, right?
Absolutely.
Well, so on this diet, you actually require more water than normal. I ran into a problem with this because I didn't realize, and I'm somebody that worked for that same company with Joan, so you know, I have my water system on the counter. I'm running my I spin my water, and my daughter calls it the tornado. I make my tornado water every morning, and I'm drinking water all the time, but I didn't realize how much more water you need on this diet. And the reason is that you don't have a lot of carbohydrates, which are the types of foods that are mostly made up of water. So you lose a bit of water out of your diet. So what they say is that you should have a quart of water in the first hour you wake up. And then before noon, you should have anywhere from another quart to maybe 48 ounces of water. And that should be mainly most of your diet in the morning is a lot of water, and sparingly eating some food when you break your fast. And what I find with me is that I had to add extra salt to my water. So now I drink 2 or 3 glasses of water that I put Himalayan sea salt in. Well, actually, Himalayan's not sea salt, is it? There's no sea in the Himalayan. So anyway, I'm using Himalayan salt, which is called pink salt, and I love the flavor of it. And I put it in my water because one of the things about the ketogenic diet is that it throws off some of your sodium-potassium balance. And I didn't understand that till recently. But really what happens is that when you eat a high-carb diet, which is what most people in America eat, what happens is your body, your kidneys regulate your sodium, so they actually make the body hold on to more sodium and more water. And when you switch over to the ketogenic diet, your body loses a lot of water, a lot more, so you secrete a lot of that sodium. So you need to add it back into your diet. I thought this was really fascinating because one of the things they tell you with high blood pressure is to stop eating salt, right? And the reason they do that is because you retain more water. And the reason most people have high blood pressure is because of inflammation in their arteries, but also the fact that their arteries are pretty much blocked. There's not that much room for your blood to flow through. And if you eat a lot of salt and increase the volume of your blood, which is a lot of its water, then you're going to have a problem with that amount of fluid trying to fit through a condensed or hole that's much smaller than it's supposed to be. So they take you off salt to lower the volume of blood and water in your system, so it makes it easier for your circulation. And that lowers your blood pressure. Well, why do you have that much inflammation in your arteries, and why are they're not as open as they're supposed to be, and why do you have a problem with too much water in your systems? Because you eat too much carb and too much sugar. So here you have a diet that's removing all those things, but then you have to compensate a little bit with salt and drinking a little bit of extra water. So that's the main thing you have to pay attention to right away. Now, you don't have to just add salt to your foods. You can eat a lot of celery and cucumber and sea vegetables, all that type of thing. Add a little extra salt to your food. I love Himalayan salt because it doesn't taste salty to me. It tastes like a mineral mix. It just has a great flavor to it. So I use that. And I noticed that adding my salt to my water, I just felt better. I noticed that I gained a few pounds back. I actually now know that if I get too skinny, which for me, I'm always skinny anyway. So if I lose a couple pounds, it's usually not because I didn't eat, it's because I didn't drink. And so it made a big difference for me.
You need that water weight.
I need that water weight, yes.
So you were going to tell us, I have a question about ketones, but you were going to tell us some of the other things that we have to, or you're going to tell us more of the other things we have to add.
You can ask it now. You can ask it now.
Well, so how does one know what their ketone number is, and how do we get a sense of what's a good number, what we're shooting for, how do we measure that?
Well, here's what you do. You have to buy a glucose ketone meter, and then you have to get the strips for it, right? This is what I did when I started on my program. You can order a glucose ketone meter from Walmart. That's where I got mine. I ordered it online. They don't normally have it in the store, but the Walgreens did not have the one I wanted, and it was called Precision Extra. And I ordered it from Walmart. I got it in, got some strips, and basically, just like a diabetic, you can prick your finger, test your glucose, stick a different strip in, check your ketones. You do that once a day. I don't check it that much anymore because I know what it feels like to have my blood sugar and ketones balanced. I've been doing it now since July, right? So I know what it feels like. I can even tell when I have a really good balance, right? And I can tell when my blood sugar is at 70, I can feel the difference between that and 60 and the difference between that and 80. I can just feel it. I know, you'll laugh, but one day I made a drink just to kind of, because, I'm an herbalist and a nutritionist, and I have tons of stuff sitting around, so I play with effects on my body. And one day I just whipped up this drink, and I drank it, and my blood sugar dropped 25 points. And I was sitting there reading a book, and I was thinking, wow, something just happened, right? And I thought, I got to go test this. So I ran out and got my strips. Yeah, my blood sugar was 60, and my ketones were around 5. And that was just full-blown ketosis. And it was really interesting feeling. That's a little low for me for all the time, 60. But that 60 blood sugar is perfect ketosis if you have a major tumor or you have a major cancer going on. But I don't think personally, because of the tools we have today with MCT oil and the easy way it is to raise your ketones, that you have to be as strict with your diet. I was just playing around, and it's part of what I do to learn things, right? I'm my own laboratory, so that's what I do. So, you get a meter and you test it, and for a while you're going to test it every day. Right? And if you want, you can test certain foods that you eat with meals and see how high your blood sugar goes up. And if you find out a certain meal and a certain food spikes your blood sugar 40 points, you want to pretty much quit eating that because that's an unsafe level. And if you have cancer or you're worried about getting it again, you don't want to be raising your blood sugar that much. It turns on too many other things in your system, and it opens up the floodgates to feeding cancer. Right? So I want to cover one more thing before I go on, and that is intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting is when you go long periods of time during the day without eating anything. Now, what is the advantage of that? Well, originally when it came up, intermittent fasting was a way that signaled to your body that your food supply was low and it needed to conserve energy. But we now know that it also turns on all these amazing anti-aging effects in your cells, right? It also really cleans up and detoxifies your cells. It creates all these different things with your metabolism that prolong your life. It's actually one of the greatest anti-aging things you could ever do. And I used to study a little bit about this because I put a certain herb in my Tianchi that I formulate called trans-resveratrol. And taking 100 milligrams of trans-resveratrol has some of the similar effects to going on an intermittent fasting diet. But in the context of ketogenic diet, it works so much better when you go long periods of time to in between eating a meal, so that your body makes these ketones and lowers its own sugar. Now, when I first heard of this, I thought this was really hard to do, right? I'm not going to go, they say to start out 12 to 16 hours without eating. But then I actually, thought about it, and I almost went 12 or 14 hours every day without eating already, because I ate dinner at 6 or 7 and I didn't eat till 10 o'clock. It's not that hard to do. Think about it. You eat dinner at 6:30 or 7 at night and don't eat till 10 o'clock. What is that? That's 15 hours right there, right? It's not like you're sweating it a whole lot. And if you can have a cup of coffee, or you can have a couple tablespoons of MCT oil and whatever else you want in the morning, and it doesn't break your fast, it's really not that hard. And what you notice, when I first started this diet, I was doing a basic minimum of 16 hours. Sometimes I go 18 just to see what it felt like. It wasn't that hard. Sometimes I went 20 just because I got involved with work. I was having a good time. I didn't pay attention. And all of a sudden, 20 hours has gone by since I ate last, and I still felt pretty good. So it's not that hard to do. It's only hard because you're starting the diet and you think it's going to be hard. Once you get into it and realize that you don't get hungry the same way you used to, and your metabolism's different, you actually burn fat, and not only fat in your diet, but fat on your body, that it's not that hard to do. And so I'm in the process of moving my fasting up to a minimum 18 hours a day, 18 to 20. And I'm only doing that, and you're kind of laugh, Joan. I didn't decide to do that. I just noticed a couple of days in a row I had too much to do and didn't eat, and I went 18 to 20 hours both days, and it didn't bother me at all. So now I'm thinking, well, why don't I just try that for a while, right? And so that's how I kind of got into that idea. But intermittent fasting frees all this energy up in your body. It regulates or lowers your blood sugar, and then allows your ketones to stay up and to stay constant. And remember, you can have oil in the morning. You can have some butter in your coffee. You can put MCT oil in your coffee, that type of thing, or in your tea. Or if you don't drink any of those, you can just have water and have some of it. So all those things are possible that don't break your fast. So it does give you something as you're maintaining that low blood sugar.
And Roger, would it work if your fast, if your length of fast of your intermittent fasting sort of cycles is cyclic, so that in a way, like, you don't have to maintain 16 to 18 hours daily. You could have some 6-hour days, 16-hour days, or 12-hour days, and then some of them being the longer.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't have to be an exact thing. If there's been a lot of days where I had a different work schedule. I had to be downtown. I had to go somewhere. Or I'm in California. I'm traveling. I'm not on the same schedule. I'm still in ketosis. That day I only had a 12-hour fast, or whatever. Or that night I ate at 9 o'clock at night. Normally I only eat it till 6, right? So I'm thrown off schedule. I still was in ketosis. But you get a little bit better benefit if it's always a certain amount of time. But heck, I could go back into that schedule within a day. It's not that big. The main thing is don't stress out about it, because stress ruins your ketosis.
Well, that was my question, if people had to feel so rigid about it. And you answered it perfectly, especially when you correlate the stress factor to it.
Yeah, the reason I say this is that I've listened to so many lectures on this, and I've heard it 2 or 3 times. And these are people that are taking their ketones and doing their studies every hour, or not every hour, but sometimes 5 or 6 times in a day. They're taking their level of ketones and trying to figure out exactly what it is, and so they report that almost every single time their blood sugar spikes really high, it's after they drive to work and get stuck in traffic, or after they confront somebody at work and they have an argument, right? All this stress drives your secretion of glucose out of your system to drive your blood sugar up. That's what drives everything. And so stress is one of the major things that messes with your ketone level. one of the things that helped me stay on this diet was I started taking more of my own product, Inner Peace. Inner Peace is just, 3 capsules of herbs, no calories to it, right? But it regulates stress response. So I was always able to stay really clear and focused and non-stressed while I was doing diet. And believe me, because I've had a lot of strips and I have my own machine, and I read about the theory of stress. So when I was involved with something where I'm stressed at work, things are going a little out of control for me, and I'm dealing with stuff, I remember to test my stuff, and every single time my ketones go down, my glucose goes up, and it throws off your regulation. So, and I'm not talking about taking a lot of herb. I'm talking about just taking it once a day. It calms your nervous system, and it calms your response to stress, puts your brain in a different function, so it's easier to stay on it. So you got to pay attention to the fact that you want to do something every day, whether it's taking Inner Peace or meditation or a walk in the woods. In fact, you should do all 3 of those things every day. Meditate, walk in the woods, take some Inner Peace. And then it'll make you feel better. It'll regulate your whole system. Basically, it's all about regulation, right? And so that's basically one of the cornerstones of this diet. It's not just eating the food, especially with cancer. Cancer is one of those things where people lose control. They feel like they are so out of control with everything in their life, and they just want to get some control back. That's one of the things that's common with every single person that gets cancer. And in fact, they get that feeling of doom, that feeling of they've lost control of everything. And so the diet's one way of getting control. Dealing with your stress is one way of feeling like you're in control of something. And so it's a great thing. It's great to have as many things that you can to let you know that, yes, you have a choice in the way you feel, and the way you feel not only physically from your food, but mentally from the things that you're doing that are just good for you, right? Now, I just want you to understand that you won't be low energy on a ketogenic diet unless you're just not eating enough, or you're not doing the diet exactly right, because your body has the capability of storing almost somewhere around, I think it's 40,000 units of energy with fat and only 270 units of energy with glucose. Think about that. It's off the charts the amount of energy you have access to when you're in ketosis and you're burning fat. The average person who's 30 pounds overweight literally could go a month or 2 without ever eating and not really damage their health because they have enough fat to break down into ketones to run off of. I couldn't do that myself, but a lot of people can. So it just depends on what your weight is. And this is, again, one of the reasons why you have this metabolism is that it allows you to keep yourself from starving. So when you have too much glucose in your system and it's stored mainly in your liver and your muscles, it spills over into your bloodstream, and that's where insulin comes into effect. If you have too much of it continuously, you build body fat, and you also build LDL cholesterol, which is the main problem, one of the main types of cholesterol that is involved with heart disease. So this diet could have a beneficial effect on so many chronic illnesses. Even though tonight we talked a little bit more about cancer, you could have a great effect on blood pressure, you could have a great effect on diabetes, on obesity, on high blood pressure, all these different things, just because, again, what is it based on really? You're just regulating your blood sugar. You're letting your body go back into its own really perfect homeostasis and just running the way it's supposed to be. So, you have any other questions, Joan?
I guess I wanted to know if exercise is important in the ketogenic diet, how that factors in.
Yeah, it's very important in all the diets, because if you're eating too much sugar and you need to move it out of your system, the only way to do that is to burn it up. So you got to have movement, right? You got to have some movement. It doesn't mean you have to exercise really hard. It could mean a brisk walk for a mile every day. It could mean rotating lifting weights, and we're only talking about lifting weights for 15 minutes. You could be using rubber straps at home and just doing weights in your doorway. But you want to get some muscle movement because the movement of muscle requires burning up your glucose. And remember, part of this ketogenic diet is lowering the amount of glucose in your system.
And doesn't extreme exercise actually impact your blood sugar the other way? Can it?
Yes, it does, because extreme exercise can be a stressor. So it's not going to actually have the effect a lot of times that you think it will. And here's another tip, and I only know this because of my own personal experience, is that sometimes you'll think you're eating perfectly and you haven't eaten for 20 hours and you test your blood sugar and your blood sugar's high. It's up around 100, and it's normally never there. Well, you know what you actually did? You didn't eat enough protein the day before, and so your body's now breaking down muscle tissue to make sugar. So that's a no-no too. So you have to pay attention to your diet and make sure you eat protein. Certain people require more protein than others. If you exercise a lot, you should up your protein by 15 to 20 grams over someone else. Or if you exercise a lot on 2 different days, on those 2 days, eat 20-some grams of protein more than you normally will eat. But the average person can do really well on 75 to 80 grams of protein. If you're exercising a lot that day, try 100.
Is there some way to for you to express to us like a general guideline of percentages of fat in our diet versus protein, et cetera, on this ketogenic diet?
Sure. In general terms, try 70% fat, 15 to 20% protein, and 10% carb. Most carbs coming from vegetables. Now, when you've been on this diet a while, there's a lot of places that are people that suggest that one day, like every 4 days, you eat an extra 100 grams of carbs with your evening meal because your liver needs to get it stored the glycogen back. And then you go right back to the normal diet. It's like eating a big sweet potato, right? So that's kind of the idea behind that.